Okay, well, it's 6 o'clock, so I feel we shall begin. So hi to everyone. I'm Oak. I'm from the Climate Museum UK, and I will be facilitating this session today.
1 second, I just give a quick translation. If we do it in small phrases, I can be even more efficient in being faithful to your words. Ela é Oak, Camylla. Ela faz parte do Museu Museu Climático, digamos, e ela é a moderadora para a nossa sessão hoje, começando agora.
So our event today is part of Culture Declares Emergencies, a series of offer talks.
O evento hoje é parte de uma série de rodas organizadas por A Cultura Declara uma Emergência.
We are looking today at Earth Day and how artists are responding with Earth-inspired pieces of artworks or artists that inspire them to do with the Earth.
Nós estamos olhando hoje com artistas sobre o Dia Mundial da Terra, como os artistas estão respondendo, como os artistas estão colocando propostas. Queres passar? Ok, Manage vai precisar registrar.
So the way this is going to work today is it's going to be an open forum and discussion where artists will have up to 10 minutes each to talk about their art and then respond to other people's work.
Isso, a forma, Camylla, do que isso vai acontecer hoje é cada pessoa vai ter 10 minutos e os artistas depois vão ter uma oportunidade de responder à vontade a todas as apresentações.
To begin, we're going to start with Jamie from New Leaf sharing a video of a piece of artwork by Meg. I'm sorry, I'm not sure which organization they're from. And then we will go to me and then we'll pass it around. Yes. So
can I just ask a quick question? Are you saying that for the first part is artist, and then responses?
Yes.
Got it. Camylla, a proposta que cada artista apresenta e depois de todas as apresentações tem respostas.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, so this is one, hang on, let's change it. All right, anyway, this is a piece I made at the start of last year, and it's kind of funny looking back, like 1 year on. How crazy is that, first of all? But yeah, this is, I made this thinking about public spaces, and this is a graveyard nearby me. And yeah, it's just like a simple pleasure to have access to these public spaces, but it's so important, I think. It's just like, once it's gone, you realize how important it was. And I find it quite sad that well, actually, no, I'll be positive about it, because I think the last year, a lot of people have realized, like, oh, wow, you know, it is really important to have these spaces and to be able to walk around and just see a little bit of wildlife, like, you know, just be around trees. That is, it's something you can't describe, really. It's just, once you're in it, I think it's so important, and it's not disconnected at all from the mental health crisis, I would say. This is when you start just taking away these spaces and destroying the countryside, you do, you know, it's a part of us. It's a part of all of us. So yeah, that's one I created in response to that feeling at the start of last lockdown. And also these ones. So these are sort of to do with like how we live in this kind of world of, I don't know, I'm trying to think how to explain it. We're in a place where we are quite detached from the climate crisis, and we don't see a lot of us don't see all the warning signs and how it does impact us in our everyday life. It seems like maybe some faraway thing that is not relevant, but it's absolutely relevant. It affects everything. It affects, you know, how much fresh water we'll have access to in the near future, how much food we'll have access to. It's not some detached thing. It's not detached from us. It's, so yeah, that's what that was about. How we're so focused on what's in front of us that we can't kind of see the bigger picture sometimes, and how that, you know, we've had a lot of flooding, and I guess the thing is, because we're in the Western world, it's somewhat easier to ignore because we are somewhat detached from the real terrors of like drought and freak weather, but it is starting to creep in, and yeah, it's something we need to act on. It's so important. So this one again is about mankind and how we sort of see ourselves in this little bubble, and that we're separate from nature.
Sorry, that's the end of that film.
Okay, thank you. Then I shall continue with my pieces then. So I am a poet first and foremost, and I'm going to be performing 4 poems for you today. The first poem I've written directly in response to this session, and I wanted to think about what is my connection to the earth, and what would I like that connection to be. So this is currently an untitled piece, but I shall read it out loud. Someday, when I am a better person than this, my mythic hands will divine into dowsing rods for the earthborn among us. See, I have this dream in the early mornings, when the magpie carves mischief into the sky with his tail and into my grin with his claws. A dream that we will survive this. It's a heavy wish that sits on my chest precariously. I can't shift my weight in case it will go tumbling onto the dusty floor. It's held there like plant pots in macrame, desperate to be watered, each not a knuckle in a fist that clenches uncertain. I know I have black bile blood in my veins, that I am a burrowing creature who hides, one of many making beds out of dug graves, buried deep and shamefully waiting, all cold and dry and scared. Search the sediment layers and you will find my fears colored like clay, fears that the earth is cemetery stained, that we only exist to lie with bones and broken promises, cursed to die between forgotten things. But I have this early morning dream, that there is something good under the surface, that we can grow these hearts of the land, the bulbs planted deep and tender that thrum worms up between our toes. These familial muscles, the size of our muddy hands, can be squeezed, bringing soft tears to our cheeks. We can push life back into the roots. Remember, the earth can bring things born anew. We no longer distant hopes of blooming. Right now, my palms are as smooth as beach stones. They have never held a shovel, and I live in places where earth is eaten by concrete. I wouldn't know where to begin to pry possibilities from the dirt beneath my feet. But someday, I will start that commune that I pine for in late summer evenings when the sparrows chatter loudly in the trees and the plums hang comfy and yellow, ready to be taken in playful teeth. I will work at the community garden, pull dirt from nails and stems from seeds, find stability in the raised beds and orchards keen for immature limbs to learn gardening. I will teach that our ground is sacred and within each of us. Yes, someday, when I am a better person than this, my mythic hands will divine into dowsing rods for the earthborn among us. So that was a piece I wrote in response to Earth Day. But when I'm not writing for like commission, essentially, I often try to influence and integrate nature into my pieces. I've recently finished a pamphlet of poems, every single one that is about birds, because birds very much shape how I view the world around me. So I'm going to read 3 pieces from this pamphlet. They're quite short pieces, and the first 2 are in response to each other. So the first one's called Dawn Chorus Part 1. Some days I hear the dawn chorus, and other days I wake up and there's just a flat world waiting, a thick slab of silence that lies on my chest and reduces me to dry earth, where no worms turn or fresh buds grow, where birds don't want to visit anymore. Dead dirt asking, when will we hear a good dawn again? And then Dawn Chorus Part 2. Some days I hear the goldfinches whisper sweet nothings to the plum tree. Other days I wake up and they are searching together, waiting, a gentle twee silence that sits on my chest and teaches me recovery is where you take your time, and quiet is buzzard sight. Do not ignore the need for peace. Do not ignore that which has become before, how every time you touch death has allowed you to exist, here, hidden under fruit. You are learning survival. You are growing astute. The small birds decree that sometimes the deafening is so you can breathe. And my final poem for today is called Total Grebe. It's after From Total Man by Hannah Silver, who is a great poet. And it's a poem that you read 2 ways, the first half and then all together, for 2 different meanings. So the way I'll perform this is I'll read the first part of the poem and then read it all together. I face my own reflection. I am great crested. I am heraldry. They find pond dipping impolite, but I shine like Brum's iron ore. I keep the false truth. Let the hypomania grow. I lose my crest in the winter, lose my sheltered mimicry, become something unseen. I face my reflection. I face my own changing flesh, a reflection. The reeds act as a frame. I am great crested, pretend to be grey and chestnut. I am being watched nervously. Heraldry, learning my royalty. They find pond leeches line their prude lips, dipping impolite, pout at the sight, but I shine like chubby legs, like Brum's canal-blooded kin, born in iron ore, a stubbornness in my blood. I keep my shirt off my back, the false truth hidden under my pant line. Let the hypothermia turn me puerile, mania grow as I become adolescent. I lose my sense of self, my crest in the family. My body learns winter. I was a summer child. Lose my inhibition. Under grass banks, sheltered, lobed feet tentative, I try mimicry of the men. Become great crested grebe, something rare in the coming years, unseen. I disappear into the water, face my reflection, and stare hopefully. Thank you for listening to my pieces. I will be passing on next to Meg Mckenzie, who will be sharing her work.
Thank you very much, Oak. That's beautiful. My first piece is an animation which I made over the summer, which is it's quite personal, but it's a response to a sort of communication through vision and dream with plants, and it's representative of interconnectivity between species and humanity, sentience in nature, and plant intelligence. So I'll just share my screen now and see if, I hope it all works for you.
Hello, love. Cool, that's late.
Okay.
I think. Wait.
Sorry, can people see the screen?
Yes.
Is it all black?
Oh yeah, it is all black.
Okay, great. Here we go. So that was my animation. There's 333 individual hand-painted frames in that one. So as you can imagine, it took quite a long time to create itself. And it was heavily inspired by reading one of the greats, The Secret Life of Plants. I'm only halfway through, but it's really opened my eyes to how responsive plants and nature can be to humans. So the next piece I have to show is a painting, an oil painting, which I only just did, and it's for Grow Wild, who are a part of Kew Gardens, and this is a project which is in partnership with Climate Museum UK. And this painting goes alongside a animation which is representing the tale, a Celtic tale of how we've basically lost our ancient plant knowledge. So in response, I did this painting, which is showing native plants and fungi from the UK, depicted in the location on the body where they are supposedly meant to aid. So, for example, Amanita muscaria is really good for like your back muscles, and fennel is good for your intestine, and so on and so on. But obviously, this is an incredibly small amount of the plants that there are around the UK, of course. And in the original tale, there were 366 plants depicted, one for each joint and sinew. And also my final piece is a dress I made last year. I made it to wear at at like sort of Extinction Rebellion events, or you know, events where the climate and animal ecological crisis is involved. And I embroidered multiple creatures on all over the dress. So there's a scorpion, and I did a moth. Hand embroidery takes a very long time, so I'm still working on this dress a year later, but hopefully in a year it will be even more heavily encrusted by wonderful nature creatures. And there's a dragonfly. So yes, those are my some of my recent nature creation works. I suppose I've always been responding to nature through my art, but these are some of the most recent ones. Thank you very much for listening. And I will pass on to Pearl.
Hi, that was really beautiful work, Meg, and Oak, your poetry as well. I really loved it. So thank you for sharing. So I'm going to talk about my tapestries that you may have seen on the flyer for the event. So here's the first one. It's a cross-stitch tapestry, and it's I'm going to talk about how my research during my degree during my English literature degree led me to make these tapestries. So in my first year, I did research into medieval otherworlds accounts, and about how in these medieval stories, there are layers of worlds: the primary world of the reader, the secondary world of the narrative, and a tertiary otherworld that the protagonist enters. And it's a place where the rules and laws can be shifted and transformed. And the protagonist often enters the world through an elemental boundary, like a body of water or a hole in the earth or an area of dense fog. And the other world is a mysterious zone, a land of the wild and the hidden and that which cannot be understood. It is a land that cannot always be penetrated, that can either choose to reject you or to allow you in, or even to disappear and reappear at will. So in my thesis, I looked at this idea of the other world and how it relates to more modern literature. And then after my degree, the ideas sort of just stayed with me and ruminated with me for a while. And I started expressing the idea of the other world through tapestry and visual art. So I was really interested with, especially because I lived in Iceland 2 years ago, where I encountered really beautiful otherworld spaces. And in Iceland, the folklore is such an integral part of everyone's national identity. Like, everyone believes in the hoodoo folk, or the hidden people, which are elves and trolls who live in mountains and just in the landscape. And often when I was hitchhiking around, I would ask people, do you believe in the hoodoo folk? And I would get stories. So it's a really amazing, active body of folklore. And I started thinking about how other worlds are also real landscapes, not just fictional ones or not just poetic ones. And they completely exist in the real world, but because of climate catastrophe, they're being destroyed. And while I was in Iceland, the smallest glacier in the world actually melted and vanished entirely, which was really sad. So I've always found the ideas of landscapes, particularly depicting landscapes and writing about landscapes, is a really rich topic for me. So yeah, so with my tapestries, I was just creating a really colorful, exuberant expression of nature, with the idea of a place where the rules and the laws are all different. Yeah, and this one is inspired by medieval maps. So I wanted to create a piece that's expressed from above and can also be viewed from any way up, if you can see. So yeah, and the title, which is embroidered at the bottom, is Einkis Man's Land, which means no man's land in Icelandic, which was the name of an exhibition I saw while I was there. Yeah, and there's also this final one, which is this one is more it's more of an abstracted depiction, and it's more kind of inspired by like Jungian archetypal symbolism and like symbols that exist in inner and outer landscapes. So this is like a bird, but it's also quite an abstracted kind of Aboriginal inspired bird. And with this one, I was using the 5 colors: red, blue, yellow, green and white, inspired by how in Tibetan Buddhism, those 5 colors are often used to talk about the elements. So I wanted to like do quite an elemental but more abstracted depiction of the ideas. So yeah, that's me. I'll pass on to Camylla now.
So everyone, I was just translating for Camylla so that we didn't interrupt you guys, and she heard your presentations and saw everything. And now Camylla is going to show you 2 scenes. Camylla, tu vas apresentar 2 cenas, 2 scenes from her new performance in progress, which is developing in lockdown inside a tiny little cement room with 1 window and an iron grill on the window. And you're going to see this first scene. Camylla, primera cena, Isa. I'm going to also turn off my microphone so that you just see Camylla. Okay. Quando tu está pronta, Camylla, eu estou desligando agora. Mira, si quiser passar para a segunda, é só tirar a cadeira um pouco, afasta a cadeira um pouquinho. So this is a second scene to complete the presentation without words from the Amazon. Eu estou pronto, Camylla.
Vou botar na caixa. Já?
Já.
Isso.
Thank you, Camylla. Valeu, valeu, Camylla.
Vamos
Camylla,
passar para alguém, né? Frankie.
Queres falar só, talvez em breve, porque as pessoas podem perguntar para ti depois, mas se quiser, em umas frases, explicar, não explicar, na realidade. Pode deixar isso funcionar sem palavras, se quiser, deixa eles respondendo depois.
Deixa eu responder depois, né?
Okay, so Camylla has said she doesn't want to give any explanation. She would prefer that you interpret for yourselves and that you are free to ask any questions later. Thank you for watching this presentation. This is from the urban Amazon beside the river Tocantins, city of Marabá in Brazil. Thank you. We pass, Camylla, tu queres passar para quem aqui?
Frankie.
She is asking Frankie if she would like to go next.
I'm on mute, classic. Hello everyone, and it's crazy to go next to, like, put all of these works together, because I think all of them have just been so moving and like different, and yeah, like touched on so many different things. So yeah, it's been kind of a bit overwhelming even to, I feel like back in the days when I was going to exhibitions, maybe I would be less like overwhelmed, but this is really, yeah, quite special. So I'm going to be talking not with like a personal cap on, but with a more collective cap. So I've been part of a collective called RE-PEAT for the past year and a half since it started. And we came together as a group after a very random trip to a peatland. So this is a type of wetland that forms when you get a depression in the land, and then you get water falling into the depression, and then you get plants that don't fully decompose in the water, and then they build over millennia. And these are like really special ecosystems. Only 3% exist. 3% of the land surface area is peatlands, but they are like tremendous like carbon stores, and they have like very unique flora and fauna, and they're just like amazing ecosystems. And we kind of just randomly came across them and became obsessed, basically. So we formed this group and wanted to get the word out that peatlands are amazing. So I have three kind of, first of all, I'm going to read our manifesto, and then I'm going to talk a bit about some projects that we did and some, yeah, like the ways that we approached this topic. So I'm going to share my screen. And that's not the right one. Wait,
sorry, Frankie. Deborah, you've got your mic on. Can you switch your mic off, please, Deborah? Thanks.
And should work now. Is this? Yes. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead. So we believe in collaboration, in the moss-like power of connecting. Peatlands embody the potential for worlds to collide, cuts to heal and walls to be lost in soil. They are the partnership between water and earth, the underworld, the surface and the sky, to be alive and dead and the future. They can connect people, creatures and identities, encourage crucial exchanges and submerge the trenches. We believe in education, in thinking through ontologies, learning from the bog, not about the bog. We must learn about our earth systems, about our cultural organizations, learn about their interwoven silences, layers of silence and force, learn how to unchain and rewild, and flow across interdisciplinary streams, allowing art, science, history, politics, and culture to interact. We can unlearn impressive ways of thinking. We believe in the process of reimagining, concocting a new peatland paradigm where both the inner and outer landscapes can evolve, in the moment of suspending belief, in believing, in the possibility of power melting underfoot, reimagining the I, the you, the she, the he, the they, the us. And while we enter the depths of pain and grief, we leave space for the steps of curiosity and coexistence. So very poetic for maybe a group that has some kind of, I don't know, it's maybe for an organization, I think most people wouldn't write their manifesto like that, but we chose to be a bit more, yeah, poetic, because that's kind of like our approach that we've taken, is to kind of like see all of the different layers and complexity within the ecosystem itself, and try and highlight that more than anything. So that was the manifesto. So the first project that I'm going to talk to you a bit about was this project that we did for the Common Agricultural Policy. And so this was, so basically the EU have a very big policy which takes up 40% of EU budget, and it's not very good for peatlands, let's say. So we decided to respond to this, and we already knew that there was like a quite clear policy paper being made by like some leading NGOs. So we thought, why not, like, let's do something a bit more like heartfelt, and with using people's experiences and yeah, sort of personal relationships to peatlands and feelings towards it. So yeah, we then collected many different types of contributions, from visual art to poetry to letters directly to the MEPs, and I think there was about 50 in total, and then we sent them to the MEPs. I think as a piece of advocacy work, it was maybe not the most directed in retrospect, but I think the idea was really nice, and I think that it is a really nice document. So if anyone wants to read through it and read all these amazing stories, then I really recommend that. And yeah, it's kind of like been our approach to kind of be like, okay, let's do this in a little bit of a different way. So that was the Peat Anthology 2020. And then the second project that I want to talk to you about is a UK project which we're currently doing. So this is basically came from a writer called Robert McFarlane. Don't know if you know him. He writes about this, what happened in the Isle of Skye. I think that's right. No, the Isle of Lewis, sorry. And there basically was some wind farms being built on top of the peatland. And then the local community came and they said, like, this is very valuable space. This, like, you can't do this. And the wind farm people said, why? Like, this is nothing. There's literally nothing here. And then they had to make an argument. So what they did was they collected all of the words from all of the ancient like Celtic language, which described the land, and it described it in such detail that they could make a case to say this is not nothing, this is very important. So yeah, and then recently the case is unfortunate, so they won the case, but now the case has been opened up again. So he sent us a tweet and was like, we should do something. So of course we decided to do 10 events over the whole year, and make it into a big project. So that's kind of what sparked it, and hopefully we can bring that in somehow. But yeah, so basically we're just touching on peatlands from lots of different angles over the next year. So I welcome everyone to join us and get involved. And then the final project that I'm going to talk about is Peat Fest. So this was our first project that we did back in May in 2020, first lockdown, and we decided to do a 24-hour global peat fest to celebrate peatlands and explore what peatlands are from lots of different angles. So we had like people, we had photographers, scientists, policymakers, singers, all sorts of different people, all talking about peatlands, and yeah, from lots of different angles, which made it feel very layered, which is makes it works with the topic, which is peatlands, because they're all these layers. And we are currently organising peatland number 2, so that's also going to happen in May. So again, I welcome you all to come, and it's going to be really fun and exciting. So that's a bit about us. I'm going to stop sharing at that point. And I'm going to pass to Danny.
Hello, I'm Danny. Today I'm going to talk about a letter that was published by Cote Sinclair, Letter to Earth book in 2019. So it's a letter that I wrote kind of to explain the situation that's happening in my country. Well, I'm from Peru, and my grandma and her family are from Iquitos, which is like the portway city and gateway to the jungle lodges and villages in the northern Amazon. So it was just kind of like to bring that perspective into, I guess, the Western world where we are. Yes, I'm just gonna read the letter. So it's called A Place I Call Home. Dear Earth, I write on behalf of my family, on behalf of my country and the 31 million residents currently living in a place I call home, Peru. A place where my family had to be woken up in the middle of the night to evacuate their homes because of the earthquakes that are affecting their day-to-day lives. A place where the people with the least money are the ones that suffer the most. And yet, a big part of our society continues to turn a blind eye as climate change isn't affecting us, or even completely denies the fact that climate change is a thing. The sad truth is that most of the time, the people and businesses who contribute to global warming the most aren't the ones who are suffering right now. And as they aren't the ones suffering right now, climate change must not exist, right? Tell me, how can we turn a blind eye to climate change when it's responsible to 150,000 deaths each year around the world? As if my natives and indigenous people from the Amazon are just obstacles or burdens, not people like you and me, whose homes are being taken away from them by major corporations that believe deforestation is just about cutting trees. I do not dare to think about the consequences that it has on the hundreds of species of plants, insects, birds, and mammals that vanish each day forever. Because somehow making money from businesses and properties has become more valuable than life itself. Therefore, I apologize to you, Earth, and to the millions of people suffering currently because of the controversial topic we call climate change. So that's a letter I wrote when I was 17 in 2019, in the middle of the April Rebellion. And at that moment, a lot was happening through climate related, earthquake related. So it was a bit of a panic for my family over there. So that's what inspired me to write that letter. But I guess I just wanted to write more of a perspective from, I guess more from their perspective rather than mine. But I kind of wanted to share what's going on in other places in the world, I guess. But yeah, that's me. I'm not sure who's going next, or if I'm the last one. So whoever hasn't done it, go ahead. Thank you.
I think you are the last one. So this has now we've all shared this wonderful work. I love how many different perspectives have been taken on the topic of Earth. The topic of Earth. And I now opening up. Oh, sorry, Dan, we can hear you. Oh. That's okay. So now opening it up for general discussion. I guess a question that kind of frames what we're talking about now is like, what inspires you about in the natural world? And I think we've all seen like wonderful examples of that in the work. So yes, opening up. Okay, sorry, I just got a message from Jamie, and yeah. So if there's any questions from the audience or any points people would like to make about their work, please go ahead.
Was the question what inspires you about
the natural world?
Yeah, I guess I can say something about peatlands because that's why I'm here. Yeah, for me, peatlands, like the more you learn about them, the more like rich they get and the more like in depth you get. And I think that's one of the things that really inspires me about them. But also this kind of like coming between. So the theme of this year's Peat Fest is the in-between. So that's really kind of like, I don't know, they're an ecosystem that's totally in between. They're not quite alive. The plant are not quite alive. They're not quite dead. They're not quite water, not quite earth, not quite overground, underground. There's all these kind of in-betweens within what a peatland is. And I think what that means is that you can draw so much meaning from them, because you can kind of, yeah, I think the spaces of in between are often the places where you can be so creative. And I think, yeah, they've lent themselves very well for us to be drawing out lots of meaning and really like applying it to different things, like talking maybe through them, like they almost act like a lens to explore different subjects. So that's kind of a bit about why I think peatlands are inspiring.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to respond to that question? Not specifically about peatlands, but yes.
I just wanted to say to Frankie, have you read any of Seamus Heaney's poems about bog bodies? I think you'd really like them. So Seamus Heaney has an anthology called North, where he wrote lots of poetry about these bog bodies, which have been preserved for thousands of years from the Iron Age times. They were like ritual killings, but because of the nature of the soil that the bodies were put in, they've been perfectly preserved for years and years and years, and they're all over the north of Europe. I think you would like really love the poetry. It's all about like the soil, like the body in the soil as like a body in a womb almost. Yeah, it's really cool. And he talks about like digging into the soil with his spade and like finding the bog body. And yeah, it's really interesting. I think you would like it.
Yeah, just one more thing on them, that they're amazing time capsules as well. So they've really like gone through, because they build over millennia and they store everything in this very like almost permanent way. They carry with them the like ancestry of like anyone who lived around them, throughout that time. So I think that also thinking about time and about human time scales, the way that we grew as a species, is also really interesting because of their specific time scale and the way that aligns with us. That's also kind of interesting.
Yes, does anyone else want to respond to the question? What inspires you about nature? Well, I can talk a bit about my obsession with birds. I think birds are one of those really important symbols in our life of the freedom that we are going to lose on this earth if the climate crisis continues in this current emergency that is within. The amount of like bird populations that have decreased over the last years, like across the world, is horrendous, and yet birds are so important to our environment and where we live. Like even now I can hear the swallows outside my sparrows outside my window, and it's a reminder of the nature that is always a part of you. A poet once said to me, if you make pigeons your favorite bird, you'll never feel alone in the city. And I very much clung to that love of embracing the nature that you see around you and holding on to that. So if you not just your beautiful like birds of prey, but your pigeons, your pied wagtails, your sparrows, your starlings, your gulls, all of those important elements of nature that you need to hold on to. So that's why I take a lot of inspiration from birds in my poetry. Yes. The next question I was going to ask, just to the group in general, is how does the natural world inform your creative practice? So I meant this different from inspiring you, in more, does it inform your practice in itself, not just the contents of your practice? I'd be really interested to hear how people respond to that.
I find like the cyclical seasons quite a good way of working, like the idea of the emergence of spring that we're getting now in the UK, like all the flowers coming to life, and then in the summer it will be like full blown, and then in the autumn it's like going into hibernation and natural receding into the winter, and it's like this cycle that's always repeating itself, which I find quite I mean, that's how my creativity behaves. It like ebbs and flows, it retreats and emerges. So yeah, I find that quite a useful way of looking at it.
I'm curious to ask Camylla about how nature informed her work, if that's possible, Dan. Especially since she's coming from a very different environment.
Yeah. Como a natureza impactou ou inspirou o toque teu projeto artístico? Se te falo em frases, eu vou... Yeah. So we're going to go for it. I'll translate.
Ok. Eu acho que a natureza sempre fez parte da minha vida.
I think that nature has been such a huge part of my life.
Então foi criada dentro da floresta, nos rios, entre os rios.
Inside the forests and between the rivers.
E eu pude, desde de menina até que eu pude perceber várias diferenças aconteceu nesse nosso ambiente.
And since I was a young child, I could see the differences, the impacts inside the rivers and the forests.
E cada vez que isso vem acontecendo, me dá mais inspiração para poder mostrar através da minha arte, no caso do meu corpo, da minha movimentação.
And as each time this happened, these changes within nature, she could perceive the impact on her art, particularly through her body.
Como era antes e por que aconteceu e por que tá assim, né?
How nature was before and why it has been changing now.
Por isso eu achei muito importante o poema e a questão do projeto com a lama, porque a gente sabe que a natureza ela tem o poder de se reinventar novamente, de reerguer novamente algo que nós, ser humano, não consegue.
She thinks it's very important the poetry that she's heard and the projects about the peat, because it really shows how much can be learned from nature, and also how human beings can re-emerge and grow through these knowledges.
Então, desde os pássaros, a terra e as plantas, a gente sabe que um dia, independente do que acontecer, eles vão voltar, se reinventar novamente, mas quem está causando isso, que é o ser humano, vai ficar em extinção.
She thinks that whether it be from birds, whether it be from the land, from the rivers, from peat, she is confident, we know, that they will reinvent themselves and they will grow again. But we know that human beings are on the verge of extinction.
Por gostar tanto de viver, né, nesse mundo, eu acho que a minha arte, eu acho que todo tipo de arte contribui muito para que as pessoas conscientize as pessoas a querer viver, a continuar vivendo, a querer ver suas futuras gerações percorrendo todos os caminhos que o seu antepassado percorreu feliz e assim, com um bem viver, né? Garantindo o direito de todos e o direito do meio ambiente.
She thinks that her art and all the arts that she's heard contribute to sensitizing, to conscientizing people, and to be aware of the different ancestral pathways that exist that can take you into the vision of good living, bien vivre, which is probably, as you all know, an indigenous, pre-industrial concept of living within and in cooperation with nature.
Nice.
That's it.
Thank you.
Valeu. Obrigado, Camylla.
I'm going to direct my question. Thank you very much for sharing this. It's really nice how you brought all our different artworks and together in your response and their importance as like a collective. I was going to ask Danny actually to ask how nature informs your work, especially coming from a perspective of writing about Peru, with something I have no familiarity with, being British. So I was wondering if you wanted to talk about that.
The thing is, okay, so how nature inspires me, it's mainly its beauty and its resources. Like places in South America and the Amazon are one of the most beautiful nature areas, in my opinion, at least. Maybe I'm biased, but and the fact that, for example, my grandma has taught me a lot about, she doesn't believe so much in Western medicine as much as she believes in natural medicine, and in her belief and how they see it, every medicine that can cure us can come directly from the Amazon. In fact, most Western medicines have come from some parts of some ingredients or some parts of the Amazon itself. So my inspiration is its beauty and its way that not only, like, it can give us life in that sense, but yeah, I guess that's how it inspires me.
I really love that. My mum's the same in the sense that she's like, all of our medicines can come from the garden.
And it did in the past, so you know, yeah.
So that's, yeah, I can see where the inspiration comes there. I was gonna open up the floor to our audience and ask if there's any questions people want to put in the chat, and I could ask to our artists. I will give like a couple of minutes for that to come through. So yeah, if there's any questions you have and want to know about like what inspires people, other artworks they've done, anything like that. Okay, I'll read out the first question because I really like this idea. But if you could have one wish, what would it be? So does anyone have a wish that comes to mind that they would ask for? Yeah, Frankie?
Sorry, I'm eager. No, I guess like we have a sort of vision, which is a peatland paradigm shift. So that's basically where the shift in perception when you go from kind of not really realizing the full values of peatlands, or the kind of you maybe view them in a solely monetary way, to kind of becoming fully engrossed and appreciative of peatlands. So that would be my one wish, is that everyone had a peatland paradigm shift.
I really like that wish. That's a good wish. My go-to wish what instinctively came to mind would be for the climate crisis to be over and us to find balance in the world. But then I remember it's not just about fixing the problems that have come about, but also changing the systems that caused those problems in the first place. And I think if I know normally when you ask for wishes, you have to be very careful with how you word it. But if I could ask for a revelation or an enlightenment where people realize the harm that these current systems are doing to this planet, then that would be what my wish would be. So hopefully that would also incorporate a peatland paradigm shift. Does anyone else have a response to that question? If not, I will move on. Okay. The next question is, it would be great for you all to find a way of collaborating, and if so, what would that look like? I think that is best reflected in the Good Living project that is currently being worked on, where young artists from across the UK are going to be responding to pieces from art from people who are in the Amazon, and in response to responding to that. So that's a project that is coming up that is currently in the pipeworks, and I'm sure Jamie could explain a lot better if I handed over to Jamie now. I'm not sure if Jamie wants to explain though.
Sorry, yeah, just briefly. Just keeping warm in my rain. It's a bit cold in here. Yes, just really briefly. Working with Dan and Camylla and other artists in the UK. I'm just pausing so Dan can translate. To around this notion of dreams. So Camylla has got this really wonderful earth-related earth-resonant dream that is that kind of liminal space, that kind of in-between, that liminality, that in-between dream space, and how that space can connect to to create these dream spaces from an indigenous ecological knowledge basis can then help us artists, other artists more from kind of Western possessions that are more kind of a dualistic view towards nature, can then help kind of co-produce, for them to co-produce work in relation to that, in that kind of liminality, in that liminal flux space, in that space of culture that is growing, and how that work can then be co-produced and presented in like a virtual space, and again in a mixed reality, an alternative dream space, suspension of disbelief reality. So that's a kind of, yeah, that's a project that we are working on, that relates to this talk. So I'll switch myself off now.
Thank you. This is also a moment for any of the other artists to talk about if they're doing any collaborative projects at the moment. I'd be really curious to hear what projects are happening. Peat Fest. I love that. I know I'm currently working with the Climate Museum UK with a group in Birmingham called Girl Grind, and we are looking to finding people who are looking to find young people and engage them, young artists, and engage them in the climate emergency and producing art that is in response to that, which is a project I'm really excited about. Okay, I'll move on to the next question. I really like Bridget's question. How confident do you feel making art about ecological themes? And do you experience barriers to making this work on this theme? So if anyone would like to respond to that.
I'd quite like to respond. I think sometimes work around nature, especially when it's climate-based, sort of segregates itself into, you know, depicting utter horrendous destruction and, you know, what we're losing, and then trying to depict beautiful, you know, magical what we want. And it's really hard to sort of find that mid-space, or that place where the conversation can start, or sort of intermingle them a bit more, or find beauty in the damage and the rot, and or the other way around. So I think it's quite hard to, you know, sometimes you don't want to just create something because you think, oh, it's very pretty, or you don't want to be damning and make it look, you know, you don't want to bring people down with your depiction. So yeah.
I really relate to that. Pearl, do you have anything to say? Sorry, I don't want to put you on the spot. It's just, you looked.
For me, it's the easiest thing to make artwork about, because I see nature as just that. I see myself as nature, like I see humans as nature. So for me, making work about nature, it just feels like the most organic, natural thing, and it is the theme that I return to over and over again, like with my academic work and just with art making. It just feels completely, yeah,
natural.
Yeah, for lack of a better term, yeah.
Can I maybe something that we struggle with, not just me, but as a group, is like, how do you speak for an ecosystem? We kind of now being like, oh, we talk about peatlands, but what would a peatland want to say? You know, sometimes we have to ask ourselves, are we saying it right? Are we doing it justice? And I think that's quite also a tough thing to kind of get to terms with, especially when we're so in our own human-centric thing. We tend to quite often make things, anthropomorphize things. So I think the challenge is to try and not do that. But yeah.
Thank you.
For me, the challenge is like making work about more about like urban environments and about the human experience. For me, like I feel a barrier with, like, that's always something that I've tried tried to explore, because yeah, I find it much more difficult to make work about the modern experience, like living in the city, or all the technology, even things like advertising and like all the traffic, just basically the urban modern landscapes. I feel like it's really important that we do make work about it, like make work that exists in the now. But for me, that's like a barrier that I have. So I struggle with making work that feels contemporary, I suppose, in that way.
I think my personal response to this is kind of in the middle. I don't find it easy to write about nature, but I don't find it hard. Like there's definite, I really relate to what Meg said about trying not to be too negative when writing about the climate emergency, and also trying not to accidentally create this pastoral bliss that people can escape to without like confronting the real emergency and crisis that is going on. If you sometimes when you portray the world, you don't portray it accurately. I find like as a poet, I really struggle to portray things not too poetically, which is an irony in of itself. So I think it's trying to find that balance and that in between. I hadn't considered writing about humans as writing about nature, and now that's come up, I really want to explore that in my future poetry about treating us that we are part of the environment, very much so.
Camylla would like to respond to your question.
Então, eu me vejo, não é mais nem a questão de ter força ou coragem, uma questão de responsabilidade.
So Camylla doesn't see this so much now as a question of inspiration, but as responsibility.
São, na verdade, a arte, a cultura e no caso, o clima, são duas coisas que estão morrendo.
For her, culture and climate are two things, two dimensions which are dying.
Então, para fortalecer a arte, eu uso a dança como fortalecimento da dança, como a linguagem da dança como uma linguagem, né? E essa força, essa coragem de poder falar sobre as atuais preocupações, acontecimentos que estão acontecendo no mundo. Então, a arte tem essa possibilidade de conscientizar as pessoas de uma forma pacífica, sem que possa machucar alguém, que possa dirigir alguém diretamente, mas que possa chegar a milhares de pessoas através da arte.
For her, she uses art to sensitize, and in a pacific form, in a pacific way, so it doesn't bruise people, it doesn't hurt people. At the same time, through the body, she's able to strengthen art itself and ancestral culture itself. And so it's part of a integrated process.
Então, eu acredito que a arte, a linguagem da arte, como do corpo, como do poema, como de uma simples carta, de uma simples história, pode mudar muito a realidade, conscientizando as pessoas a mudar, para que a gente tenha um futuro garantido lá na frente e as nossas próximas gerações.
And because of that, whether it be through poetry, whether it be through a letter, whether it be through visual arts, this changes people, and people change their reality. So she thinks that this is a key way of ensuring that people can then flow into the future, and future generations will have a future.
Thank you.
Apprentice.
I think there's one more question that I missed, which was how can art making connect us to nature itself? So yeah, I'll give the artists a moment to think about that. If anyone has a response, feel free.
Oh no, you can go first.
I think that making artwork seems to make people more sensitive to receiving signs and visions or dreams or responses when they're in nature themselves. So like going on a walk and just being open, as you know, I think being an artist, you're very open to respond visually, and when you're in nature you receive gifts from the trees or from the earth, at least for me visually, and then it makes me want to make a piece of artwork based on this conversation between myself and nature. So it's almost like a collaboration. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a similar sentiment to what I was going to say. But also when you're making art, it's like you sort of move from your mind and into your body, like you go into a deeper level of response, like more of a subconscious layer of like communicating that feels more connected to nature than like our everyday, you know, way of communicating in the mind and very up here. It's like you ground yourself down.
I think personally, I find art making makes you criticize what your like default thinking. Like when you're coming, I find when I come to art, I always want to challenge myself and push myself and try new things with the way that I'm doing my poetry. And I think that is a natural part of what humans want to do. Humans want to be creative and like engage at a deeper level with what they're doing and not just repeat the same thing or produce what they're comfortable with. So I find my art making probably connects to my natural self in the way that it makes me think differently about the world and make sure that I'm not getting stuck in old patterns that can become stale and problematic. So we are coming up to the end of the session. I was letting a pause to see if anyone was gonna say a response, if that's okay. Does anyone have any final words they'd like to share about this session, about what they've heard from either the speakers or if the audience has any final words they want to say? So we can, I'll start and ask Meg, do you have any final words? And you can pass it on to someone after you.
Nothing more about art or myself, but I'm just grateful really for being in a space like this and hearing all the new exciting projects. It's reassuring. So thank you.
Do you want to pass on to someone else?
I'll pass on to Danny.
Yeah, pretty much what Meg said. It feels so good, especially since lockdown, everything, to be, I guess, in a room with fellow activists and artists who think similarly and have a connection to nature. So it feels really good. I'll pass it on to Frankie.
Yeah, like I said, somewhat overwhelming to almost just come in to have all these different perspectives and like very beautiful work, but really nice. So yeah, just thank you again. And I look forward to collaborating some point in the future. Oh, Camylla?
Então, eu me sinto muito feliz e bem à vontade de estar ao redor de pessoas que estão afim, que estão com coragem de estar lutando por esse objetivo, né?
She feels very, very happy and very relaxed among so many good people who have the courage to struggle for the preservation of the earth.
Então, eu fico bem mais tranquila de saber que existem outras pessoas com o mesmo objetivo que eu.
And she feels very relieved to discover that there are many people like her who share the same vision and same commitments.
E falar que não somos os únicos, né? Que não somos pouco, mas também não somos muitos, mas não somos os únicos a estar lutando por essa causa de querer sobreviver, de querer garantir um futuro melhor.
And she, we're not so many, but we're not so few. And it's good to know that there are many people who are struggling for a different future. Foi? Thank you.
Pearl, do you want to leave us with our final words?
Just that it's really lovely to share in all of your perspectives and see a bit of your work, and I look forward to moving forward, maybe collaborating and see where this leads. Yes, so thank you all for sharing your work and poetry and everything. Yeah.
Okay. So I've just got a message from Jamie to ask me to pass on over to Heather, if Heather is here, to talk about the larger Culture Declares emergency offer that is currently going on.
I'm unmuting. Thank you, Jamie. I wasn't expecting that. You know what? I think it's just, I was just actually writing, inspiring to spend the evening together. Thank you to all of the participants and contributors for just the thoughtfulness, the ideas, the commitment, and the sense of hope. I really think sense of hope, radical hope. We can declare radical hope as a way to see ourselves through this extraordinary time in the history of humans' existence on this planet, and just being part of this conversation. And again, the sense that the more than human speaks so strongly to us, so we can hear from the species and make our affinities with the species, I think is rich, and certainly gives me a genuine sense of care and hope, renews my sense of hope and care. So going forward with the offer, so we're just still pulling it together, but there will be 3 dedicated sessions, 2 to 3 dedicated sessions that will start in May and June. And they will be curated by a very wonderful poet performer called Zena Edwards. And Zena has been working with Culture Declares Emergency, but she's also been working with Serena Solanke on a program called Being, Seeing, Knowing as well, which is deeper reflections and immersions into the very complex and profound area of colonization and racism. So she's very excited to start to curate this. And so we will certainly be in touch. Please sign up to Culture Declares Emergency if you have not. And then we'll have you also be able to send you the newsletter. And then there is the idea that we would also, and this is shared by a collective of us, to put the offer onto the road so that we can stretch out regionally as well as internationally, potentially, and that institutions or organizations of different scales can host the offer and bring in the voices from their community, from their creatives, to explore what it really means to start this process of transformation. How are we going to do this? And I think artists and culture makers, as we all are kind of leading lights in this. And so we need many, many, many lights, many, many fireflies here to see our way through this. And thank you again very, very much. And we look forward to the next conversation.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everyone. This artwork has been amazing and it's been a really great discussion. I'm just going to hand over to Jamie in case he has any last things to say. And if not, then thank you for coming.
Thank you, Oak.
Thank you. Bless you all. Thank you so much, and see you all soon.
Everyone, good night, good evening. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you, everyone.